So to show you guys how to make some art, I looked up a random object generator online and it came up with a screw, so I'll be making a screw. And here's the image that I'll be using. I found this image online. It's good to always have a reference image so that way it doesn't get too messy. Alright, so the first block we're going to make the top first is curved, and this is how to make a curved block, what I'm doing right here. I'm making sure these two smaller blocks are centered, they're the smaller ones. And then I'm going to take the dot, I make a cross with it, and then I'm going to take the dot and I'm going to put it in the corner here, and I have to get it in place. And then I'm putting the dots on all four corners like that, and then we have ourselves a rounded block. And that's the leftmost block on the top, that's what it's going to look like. And I'm making sure it's like the same size, and then I'm going to basically extend this top, and you can see it's a different color there, and I'm setting the layer. So I'm going to set it for a lighter gray. Now I can't cover it up because then it won't be a full block size and it'll look weird and smaller. So I'm going to align them so that it's like within the grid. And then I'm basically just going to copy that over and extend it. So then I estimated it would be about 3 light blocks, and then I copied over the rounded block again and made it lighter because it finishes rounded again. Now I'm going to put those two little white blocks over it to make it like it is in the image, and now I'm going to extend it down. And it was longer than I expected. Now that it's all the way there, I'm setting the color, and it's a rather dark color, and you can do like that. That's the block that's in the bottom left, or the button that's in the bottom left there on the right, and that can help you set a color more accurately. Now I copied it over and put it under it using the layer to make it stand out like it does in the picture there. And here I just set a song so that way the music lines would disappear. Now it's time to make the tip and point of it. So watch how I do this. I'm going to take one of those I don't really know what you call it, those diagonal blocks, I'll say, and I'm going to copy it over and move it in. I'm rotating it, copying it over, and then moving it in like that. And then it takes me a while to get it set perfectly on the corners. I still didn't get it perfectly, and that's okay because it's a small part of the screw, so it won't be very noticeable when playing the level. And I'm going to set it, this is I think the darkest gray we have yet is on this tip of the screw. And yeah, as you can see, it caused me a little bit of trouble here to get it set. Now I got the color set, and I'm going to fill in the rest using that block. And this, I probably could have done this a lot quicker, but you can see I make it a lot harder than it has to be. And now the tip is set. I'm going to set it under everything because it's the lowermost block on the screw. And now it's time to make the actual screw. So I'm going to use, took me a little bit to find it, but I'm going to use the smallest diagonal block possible. And I learned later that this still wasn't small enough. And I'm going to use the smallest block possible, which conveniently they fit perfectly. And I'm just going to copy them over, make a line, and then this one also took me a while because I'm stupid. But now I have that set, so I can copy it and flip it and move it down. Yeah, I have to set the layer first. This is going to be the topmost thing on the screw, besides probably the top of it. But this is going to be the topmost layer. And I'm going to set the colors. I'm going to link them, and I realized that it's too big. So I decided to scale it down and extend it. So first I extended it and then I scaled it down to make it thinner. Now I center it on the screw, scale it down, and I'm going to rotate it because it is slightly rotated in the picture and on a real screw. I'm going to rotate it so that the corners basically line up with it, and then I'm going to just copy and paste it down the screw. And I'm definitely going to want more of them, so I'm going to copy it, move it up, and center those with the other screws. And then, yeah, to make sure they were centered, and they are. It may look a bit weird, but when you're moving through the level, it won't look too weird at all. And it's unnoticeable, any like minor mistakes. But there is our screw, and now let's move on to the next thing. Alright, so next I got a flashlight. And I found the art on Creative Fabrica. And something I learned, and you should know this, something I learned while looking for this, here's the art I'll be using, is if you look up Creative Fabrica, it's 2 words, and then what you're looking for, it should come up with something simple like this. I've just looked up Creative Fabrica Beetle after, and it looks great. And you can get some pretty detailed stuff, so definitely use that. And if you don't find what you're looking for, you can just look up whatever you're looking for and then graphic, and it'll come up with a neat graphic, and you could probably build it. So I'm going to start with the bottom of it, and as you can see, it's pretty curved, so I'm going to use those curved blocks from before, and they're very useful. You'll use them in a lot of your art. I'm going to set it for its color, and then there's another one inside it. I'm setting it on top of it using the layers, and it's smaller, so I'm using the normal size block on the outside to make it look like it's a perimeter or a border, and then I'm going to copy and scale it down and place it on the inside. And it's very hard to find a brownish color, so that one took me a little bit. And here I was just being goofy. I figured out what I was doing again and realized it's not that long, so I shortened it, and remember that both sides are curved, so I did like that, and then just extended a little bit. And instead I decided to make it 2 blocks wide so that it would be more locked to the grid. Now I'm making like that handle part, or whatever you would call it, the part with the switch on it. So I'm just going to copy and paste that curved rectangle up. It's really just 2 curved blocks. And I'm just going to fill it up. And then I'm just going to set the color. That's going to be, I copied that color. That's going to be the lighter brown than the one before. And I want it more accurately, so I'm going to use what I used before. Now I'm going to move on to the flashlight portion of it, and this is a lot like what we did before. And the reason I'm showing you me just building something instead of like actually telling you guys how to make art is that I'm like using my building as an example, because that's like the best way I can tell you guys. That's how I would that's how it would be easier for me. And I'm giving you guys multiple examples so that you can kind of get like how I make the art, so that it's kind of hard to explain, but it's basically I'm basically trying to show you the concepts of building art. And once you know the concepts of building art, it becomes a whole lot easier. And what I mean by that, by knowing the concepts, is like you could look up a picture, like I did, and say I wanted to make a flashlight, or whatever you want to make. You could just look up a picture of it that looks like this, like it's simple and easy to make with those dots, and basically look at the picture and realize how you're going to build it in your mind. Like you already know how you need to make it, and know if you are able to make it. So now I'm filling it in, again using the layers, because if I use this black outline, which there is a black outline in the picture and what I'm trying to make. It just makes it a lot easier because I don't have to set it super precisely. I can just kind of have it cover up where it goes outside the lines. I'm going to copy what I just made and flip it and do it on the other side. If it's symmetrical, that's the best way to do it. Fill in one side, copy it over to the other side. If you were at the stream where I was making the Jason mask for Shivers 2, you would see that that's how I did it. I made half of the mask and then copied it and flipped it over. And it works like that because it's symmetrical. Now this is where I didn't know if this block would kill the player or not, so I just had to test it, make sure it didn't, and it doesn't, so it's good to use. And the reason I didn't just use that little tiny rectangle in the tab where we get the dots out of is because I'm trying to keep everything scaled the same at 1. So that way, in case it's too big, I can scale it down without it getting all messed up. And that's probably how you're going to want to go about creating all your art. Now I'm just going to copy this up just like that because that's how it looks in the picture. And remember, this isn't going to look exactly like the picture, and it shouldn't either. The picture is, you'll notice that when I'm making the art, it looks a lot like the picture, but it's not going to be exactly like the picture. Maybe I don't like how the picture does one thing, and I'll change it a little bit. But it's important to remember, I'll just say this is our flashlight here, that yes, I'm trying to basically copy their flashlight, but in the level, this is my flashlight, and I'm making it how I want it. So now again, I'm using those black dots as an outline to basically just fill it in like that under it with a lower layer. And I'll set the color here. And I didn't like how dark brown the 7th channel was, so I tried to make it just a little bit lighter, but it needed to be noticeably darker. Next, we're creating the switch, and basically, if you are understanding how I've made the flashlight so far, it should be pretty simple. And I've decided that I want it as a white color. Yeah, maybe I was just too lazy to make it black, which is kind of sad because it's pretty easy. But I also liked white because I feel like everything else in this was black, and white really stands out and will give your art a little bit more pop. And whenever I say the word pop, that basically means just standing out, and because if it's all black, it's just going to be boring. And if it was all white, it would be boring. So that's why it needs some variation so that it actually looks alive. And you'll notice I'm not really explaining how I do this, and that's because it goes along with what I said before. Now, throughout this video, and it'll be a pretty long video because I'm making 4 or 5 different creations. The creations will get progressively more difficult as it continues. And yes, that was from the FitnessGram Pacer test. But it'll get more difficult because I'm trying to make sure you understand, you come to understand how we make art and how the art is made. So now I'm going to set that switch in place, and it looks pretty good, but I think this flashlight could use some glow. Look like it's actually on. Now this took me a little bit to figure out, but I wanted to set, you're going to want to set it behind everything, and I used the scaled glow, and how you can do that is go, just look up scale hack and scroll down a bit, and it'll come up with scaled glow. I'm talking about searching up levels, and just copy it as a custom object and put it in your level, and it'll work. Or you can actually get the scale hack, which I was on mobile, so I can't do that. But that's quite a process there. And I build on mobile, so I can't do that. So what I did, I saved it before doing this in case I regretted it. I scaled it down, and remember, Earlier I said you're going to want to keep everything at the same scale, or try to keep it all very close so that you can scale it down or up if you need to. And it was like very, very close, so I just had to scale it up one more and set it in place. And I was thinking about changing the background, but I didn't. And that looks pretty good. Of course, the glow could look better, but we're going to learn how to incorporate glow in our art later. So let's move on to our next build. And I had to fix this right here, as you can see. But let's move on to our next build. So next I'll be building this technical difficulty screen. You may recognize this from my SCP series. I used it quite a bit. This will use a little bit of glow, but really this is going to be teaching you how to use layers to your advantage. Now I'm going to start by just placing a block down and scaling it up to 2. And I'm pretty sure everything in this creation is going to be at a full scale. I'm copying it over so that way it is 3 blocks wide. And I set the color to gray, and that is because I felt like the white just stood out way too much. So I'm going to copy it over and find a good yellow. This isn't one of the ones where you want to go soft in the colors. You're going to want to go with the full hard color. So now we're not really getting into the layers just yet, but we will. I'm not sure how that got there. That's weird. But now I'm just going to copy it over and make each one of these colors for the screen, the technical difficulty screen. So now we're going to get into the layers, and if you don't know how that works, B is behind the player and T is above the player. So you'll see B4 through B1 and then T1 through T3. Each one of those, of course, B1 would be higher than B4 and T3 would be higher than T1. The Z order is basically just the layer number for whatever it's on. So T1 Z order 3 would be higher than T1 Z order 2, and T1 Z order 10 would be higher than T1 or B4 Z order 20. Now I'm going to copy this down and I'm going to make it white. So I'm going to set the Z order to -3 and just copy it over. And I believe this the smaller colors that I had just set, those are I think at -1. And that's because we're going to have to place a block in between it, and here's where I'm doing that. I'm going to take a big glow, and once again you can get that by just looking up a scale hack glow. There was probably a much easier way to set the Z order there, but I decided not to. But now you can see we're getting pretty close to how it looks in the picture, and I'm going to copy it over again, and I'm going to copy over the glow, and that doesn't look quite how I want it. So I decided to go to a smaller glow. I think this one's scaled to 5 because I copied it from a scale hack. And this didn't quite work out. It did not stand out enough. It was way too small. So I did decide to copy it over. At first I placed it because I'm stupid. But yeah, it's much easier to just copy it over. And I moved it off a bit. And that's because if your background is black, this will actually work. If not, you're going to have to find something else that works like a different size glow. But because the background is black, and the glow is black, it'll just disappear into the black background and blend in. Now, instead of just setting a bunch of different colors on different amounts of gray, I decided to use this brightness. So that way I am just setting these blocks for white, but their brightness is going to be different. I'm moving it up by 0.1 each time. And while you didn't see me do it at this part, I end up doing it later. You should be setting it so that each brighter one is above the last one on the Z order. So now here's where I'm going to be doing that. And the best way to do this, the quickest way to do this, I'm going to leave it on T1 and I'm going to select everything else in our technical difficulties art, and I'm going to set it for T2 because that's a whole nother kind of category above it. So now I'm going to be setting each layer. Now I'm going to copy it over at least once and set it on a higher layer so that it does cover up half of that white block and is the same size as the other one. And I didn't need to set the other ones because I have a black background like that, but I did anyways. And now that is finished, so let's move on to the next build. Next we'll be making this clock, and this is to teach you the power of the circle. Very, very important in art. So this clock is basically all circles. Let's start by making the outermost circle. I'm going to place the dot block down. And this is basically all the clock is going to be made out of. And this is how you make a circle, like I'm doing here. You're going to want to copy it down, move it as wide as you want it. That's where you're going to place the second one. And then you're going to rotate it around until it makes a complete circle. You're going to want it around 256, 500 something at the most. So now I'm setting the colors how it is in the picture. Now I'm going to make the second circle, not the lighter blue. It's going to be the same color. And instead of just copying it and scaling it down to where it's inside, I'm just going to make it again because it's the same thickness. The circle will be. Now, because of these are going to be the circles above everything, I'm just setting it for like a high layer. I'm setting it on T1 Z order 10. Now I'm going to fill it in by using the same method where I'm going to fill it in as if I'm making a circle with these blocks. And it's easier because we know how to use layers. We can just rotate it around inside of it because the other first two circles we made will cover up any little mistakes, and it'll look like it's just filling up that area because it's on a Z order under the first two circles. Now we're going to fill in the inside. This is like the biggest part. This is where you see the lightest blue. It's kind of a bluish green. I don't know what you would call the color, but I'm using the same circle method to fill it up. And I'm going to set it under every single one of those things because then it actually looks like it's just filling that part. So now I'm going to make these little lines coming off of our second circle, and that's like what the numbers would be on the real clock. I'll be setting it on the same Z order as our second circle, and I forgot to set the main fill for the clock. And that's basically what I'm calling it. I'm calling our first two circles, those can kind of be the outlines, and then the second two circles we made are like the fill because we filled it. Now this is going to be the hardest part, and it's not even that hard because making something like this is super simple if you know what you're doing. I'm making sure it's aligned with the middle, and it is perfectly. So now I'm going to make the shorter arm first. Maybe shrink it down some. And now for the longer arm, I'm just going to copy it over and make it longer than the shorter arm, and then place it in where it should go. You'll notice, like I did, that I made it a bit too long. So I'm just going to delete the first few on it. And now we've completed our clock, so let's move on to the next build. Now this is what I'll be not teaching you how to make, but it's something I made in the past. And I did put up a tutorial of how to make this specifically, and I'll link that in the description if you want it. But this is to teach you how to use glow. This is from my level Solitude. I'll just be showing you how I made it. and how glow really makes it stand out. Without the glow in this level, this art would look pretty ugly. If you make art the way I do, where it looks pretty simplistic, you're not really going to need to use glow that much. But if you want to create something like I did, where it's going to need glow, like the sunset, you're going to want to know how to use it. And here I'm going to be describing how I did it. First, I'm selecting everything and I'm just going to move it up. Now, when using glow, it's really important you know layers, which I went over earlier in this tutorial. I'm going to remove the background change and everything so that it stays put for me. When creating this sunset, I needed to know how these colors would blend together, because a lot of the glow is placed on top of each other. When using glow, you're going to be touching the opacity quite a bit, and the saturation quite a bit, and you may even use the blend tool. There was another very short tutorial I made called the neon tutorial, and I'll link that as well. Making neon also uses glow, and it does use the blend tool. Now here I'm showing you these like mountains or hills that are in the art. These are all separated by 2 layers, and they're all odd numbers, so it's like 1, 3, 5, 7. Actually, I don't think there was a 1. I think it was 3, 5, 7, and 9 was the black ground that you can see there. And if you want to see how I made that shape, you can go into that tutorial that I linked. Then I placed these white glow blocks in between each one on the even numbers, so that way each one stands off of the one right behind it. As you can see there, this one is on, 4. So that'll be in between the 5 and the 3. And you can see there how it stands off of each other. The way I used opacity for that is some of them, if they were all on opacity of just like 100%, they would all look, they would be very different. And I wanted them to all stand out the same amount. When using glow, you have to be very patient. The first time using it, and I think this was my first time using it, this sunset art took me days to make. It really is a process. You have to play with it a little bit. You have to get comfortable with it to figure it out. But once you do, you can make some pretty cool stuff. Now this in the back blends well with the background color that I've set. And I just deleted it, and you can see it doesn't look that great. But when I add it back, it really adds a nice gradient to the background and makes it look like a normal sunset. If you've understood what I've said so far in previous lessons, you'll see how I made this cloud pretty easily. I used those dots, and then I just put some curved blocks on it. Now let's take a look at this other glow. All this glow I think is different sizes. Again, I used the scale hack glow. Let's delete that, and look how much uglier that looks. It really adds a gradient to the sun and makes the sun stand out and make it look like it's actually setting. And you can see this glow is overlapping with the one that I deleted earlier. But they both go very well together, and I'm actually going to select both, and we're going to move them up so you can see them blending together. You're also going to want to play with the tools in the color where it says HSV, I think. You can play with the saturation. I used the brightness to make it stand out more. Now I'm going to select these two and move them up so you can see how they blend. Now this is further into the level. This is another sunset art that I made, and it's in the desert. And you'll notice I did the same thing as before with the layers. You see 5, you see 3, and then you'll see the 4 for the glow in between. And the glow fades nicely into those hills that I've made. And the glow I put on the sun looks pretty nice as well because it blends well with it. Again, if you really want to see like how to use this glow even more, you can check out the sunset tutorial I've made, and again, it'll be linked in the description of this video. I had that glow on the sun, just like I did with the other sun I had, and you'll see that I actually had two of the same glow on the sun, and they're probably both a lower opacity, but I put two because it can get like an even more detailed opacity on it. So this is kind of the same thing as before, but with different colors and I guess different shapes for the hills. You can see how I mess with the saturation and brightness there, and there you go. Here is how I made the cacti. You can kind of tell, same thing as before. I just made some bigger dots using the circles. Now this is a great example of how to use large-scaled glow. Again, I used the same layers for the hills or mountains or whatever you want to call them, and just put the glow in between them. I put the glow in the back so that way it stands out. You can see it really makes it look like a night sky and gives it that color. But let's take a look down here. This is as if it were reflecting on a lake. I'm going to select this glow and delete it. Now you can see it doesn't look as great. It does still kind of look like it's reflected, but as you can see, it's basically the same thing as above, but with darker colors. And the moon looks dimmer. But that glow really adds a reflection to it, and that's how you can use large-scale glow. I use it to add reflection, and there's the opacity at a lower opacity. So the large-scale glow can be used for blending things, making a nice atmosphere, or reflections. Here, this is the same thing as my first sunset, but just with different colors. So let's move on. Now, I want to show you this for the last lesson. This is basically all the stuff we learned compiled together with other stuff. This is from my level Yugen, and it's the most complex thing I've had to make. A lot of this is just knowing the skill of layers and how it helps. Another big portion of it is knowing how circles work. So let's take a closer look at this. Here's the level in action. You'll see these asteroids move in here, and I'll show you how I made that as well. But again, this isn't so that you can make exactly what I made. This is so that you can see how I made it and then make your own stuff. Now you'll see that the art inside this planet I made is big for such a small portion. These circles that I made cover it up, and the space background, that big blue area, covers up most of it that actually sticks out. First I'm going to show you the stuff that I put inside of it, inside the planet, and then I'll show you how I made it so that it just looks like it's inside that planet, it's not sticking out everywhere. I'm going to move it up here so we can like study it or whatever you want to say. So now this is like 3 or 4 different objects that I used, all put together. You'll see that I first made these circles, and they were larger than the dots that I like to use, so I had to actually use the curved blocks to make the circles. And you can just make one circle and then use it like those blocks, or you can just make half a circle and then use some smaller blocks to extend it. And yeah, first I made those 3, I spaced them out, and then I put these curved blocks. Here's a great view, and I'm swiping them right now so you can see it. Those are the blocks that I put to show where I wanted the curve, you know, I guess I would say the opposite curve, where it curves inwards, the concave. And then I filled it up behind it using the other blocks that you see there. These blocks right here. we're going to move that back to where it was so you can see how that fit in there. And the same does not go for the orange, actually. The orange is very different, and we'll get to that later. Once again, this helps to cover up part of it and give it a good curve. But this big blue area is what covers up most of it. And now I'm going to show you how I used these layers. So let's delete that, and so you can see what it looks like without it. So that gives it the curve. Now the blue area, you'll see that I had two circles there. One of them is above the blue area, and the other one is under it. So that, because there's no real possible way to make these blocks be a perfect circle. So that's why you see I put one of them on top of it, so that it kind of covers up the mistakes, kind of where I went outside the lines. So there's the layers that I used. And yeah, now you can see how there's just that like hole in the background. It's not just a big solid background. It's got holes everywhere, actually. Down there too, where the other planet is, and it's kind of the same way I made that planet for the other ones. Remember that the Z order is basically infinite. I don't know what number it goes to, but unless you're making something extremely complex, it's basically, you'll basically never run out of numbers for the Z order. So I placed those that kind of orange-red and the orange and the yellow under both of those circles. Then the blue background that's curved around the planet, I placed under the first circle and over the second. And it doesn't show it going over the second because the first one covers it up enough. Using that same strategy before is how I made the lighter blue for the space background. The dots are the curved area and then the concave area. So the convex area where it curves out and the concave area where it curves in. And then there's the other hole for these two planets, but it's in this second part of the space background that I made because it overlays the other one. And the other one didn't even need the blocks there. As you can see, I don't have the blocks there for the first space background. Now you'll notice that I didn't use the concave convex method for that part of the planet. I actually just kind of put blocks everywhere and then made the other blue area go over it so that it makes its own concave convex area. And that right there alone summarizes how to make complex art without going into glow and that sort of detail. Because it's basically over, under. Some things are over some things are under some things. It will cover up where there's mistakes that are impossible to avoid. And it'll make it look smoother and much more simpler when really it's not simple. And you'll see that I did the same thing here. That orange area, that's not a concave convex, that's just a big orange blob. And the red orange covers it up in a way that it gives it the shape that I want. Now let's take a look at these asteroids. You'll see the same kind of thing, concave convex. The bottom one I set for a lower opacity. The easiest way to do that is not use the alpha channel. The alpha is if you want something fading in or fading out. The easiest way if you're going to set something for an opacity is to set it for its color and then use the opacity like you saw there. So then I had that on the second most furthest back layer. And here is the yellow part of the asteroid that it made. This also uses part of the concave convex, but it's a lot more simpler because I don't have to make it in a circle planet. I just put the dots and then covered up where I want the dots to stop, and then you'll see that that's flat in there, and I'll get to that in a bit. You'll notice that there are these red lines in there. You can kind of see them right there as I go over this other stuff, where I did the same exact thing I did with the yellow for the whites. But you'll notice you see those brighter red lines in between the yellow. Let's take a look at what that is as I try to select it. There they are. That's to give it the concave convex. As I delete it, you kind of see how it gives the straight blocks that I put there, it gives it a curve. I try to select it again and fail miserably. So to kind of give you an example, I can move it, and then look at that, it makes the curve go in further. So again, this isn't a specific art I'm showing you, this is how to make more complex art. Let's move on to another part that I made in the level, where I made Jupiter. Again, you'll notice this is the same thing I did with previous planets, with the concave convex method. I'll just delete that blob in the background where you can see it does go way outside the lines, but our little circles that I made around it covers it up so that it does look like it has a curve. Now, those circles are the same exact color as the background I set, so that they are indeed invisible. Not quite invisible, but they appear invisible. You can't really see them. That seems stupid that I just said appear invisible. You can't quite see them. Let's move on to something else I made. This was perhaps the most complex thing I had to make, but it does use that concave convex method again, and those circles are the same color as the background, so you can't see them, but it does cover up where it goes outside the lines. And there's just the ocean. That's just a bunch of blocks, and then that will cover up the ocean a little bit and give the ocean a shape. And it'll look like the ocean has two different colors. The clouds, concave convex, just above everything else, but still under the border that's covering up our mistakes. And the same with the land, it'll be under the clouds but over the ocean, but still under the border. Hopefully this is making sense. This is a little complex. The sun is just a bunch of circles, look at that, which we learned how to use earlier. Let's move on. The Milky Way that I made, or whatever galaxy this is, same thing, just a bunch of circles, but I had to move them into place in some areas. The satellite, that's just art, like how we did in the first two lessons, where we just learned how to make some simple art using the dots and filling it in. And then if we move on further, here is some neon. Again, I have the neon tutorial linked. This won't give you a great idea of how I did the neon. If you want to really make your own neon level, it is linked in the description. And it's less than 2 minutes, the video. But you'll see this is where I used some blending. Let's take a look at this color that I used. You'll see that I turned on blending. Without it, it won't look as great, and I changed some saturation and stuff, and there you have it. So that's everything. Hopefully it wasn't too confusing for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it as well, and hopefully it helps you. Because this took me a long time to put together, and if it didn't help you, at least I tried, at least you tried. So to review, use your dots, blend your glow, stay patient with it and play around with it, get creative, find out what's easiest for you, and just keep on building, don't give up on your creations.